Hello, welcome back to my Minecraft Let's Play world. 3 months. It's been a long time since I've done this. I'm gonna go into why that's the case, but just to tell you guys, I did go ahead and finish the boathouse right here. So if we go ahead and come in here, put a bed right here, a chest, and then some. I think this was supposed to be. Oh yeah, this was supposed to be a pressure plate, but I don't think that works. Yeah, I can't remember why I did that. Well, I guess in that case, I can just do this, and then there we go. That'll work, right? So, anyways, what I wanted to go into, sort of the reason why I haven't been posting for the past like 3 months, the reason for that is I've been sort of dealing with a lot of sort of just personal stuff, coming to a lot of sort of important realizations sort of in my life. And I ended up having to take a break off YouTube for about like a month or two because I essentially had, in essence, I had and look, these shit. The melons actually worked fairly well. Anyways, so the thing that I sort of came to the realization to is I actually had a conversation with a friend, and in essence, what I ended up sort of realizing is that in a lot of ways, I've sort of ended up sort of centering a lot of my core beliefs of the world around me, and sort of just my understanding of the world just basically through YouTubers. And I realized that I kind of had a problem, and I'd almost argue an addiction to YouTube. And the reason I'd say that is because, again, I'd sort of look up to these people, on the internet, a lot of political streamers. You kind of got really big in the manosphere. And I realized that sort of just time and time again, I'd end up figuring out that these people would just bring me false promises. I wouldn't really get that much from them, and I'd figure out that they were wrong in one way or another. And that kind of made me realize, or made it to where a spark was born, where I realized like, oh, I need to actually go ahead and get off these social media platforms, which is what I realized I had to do. So I went ahead and basically just went off YouTube for like a month. And honestly, I've just haven't really gotten around to going ahead and setting up. Oh yeah, I'm trying to get a bed, not a bed, a boat, so I can go ahead and go explore a little bit. But anyways, I sort of just came to the realization that I sort of needed to take a distance from YouTube, and I ended up taking a break for a month, and then I came back, and then I've sort of been working on myself recently, and without divulging into too much detail, because I don't want this to be like a 2-hour video and have to give my whole life story, but in essence, I've sort of come to the realization now that I've never really, I guess I've always sort of seeked out external validation in my life, and I'm realizing that that's sort of starting to nip me in the butt. And I recognize that if I really want to sort of better my life and become, like, I guess the man I've always wanted to be, because I think I mentioned in this video is like part of the reason why I've even started this series in the first place, because I wanted to be, practice my social skills a little bit more. And, I'm trying to look for ways to better myself, to be less anxious, to be overall just more in control, to sort of be a better man, the man that I've sort of always wanted to be. And I've sort of just realized that, like, in order I guess the way to get there, what I need to do, and I've sort of realized this, is to learn to seek more internal validation instead of external validation. And I've sort of noticed that, sort of, basically throughout on my boat one right there. Anyways, I sort of just noticed throughout my life that all I've pretty much done is just seek external validation. And that's kind of dawned upon me because I've been seeing a therapist recently, and she sort of asked me like if I've ever experienced any kind of internal validation. There's a moment I could ever pin back to, and unfortunately I couldn't really name anything. Now, of course, a couple weeks later I was able to figure out what brought me internal validation. The closest thing I can say is probably the gym, but yeah, sort of just coming to that realization, it's kind of leaving me a lot of time to reflect, and I've sort of looked back and realized that, again, in a lot of ways, that a lot of the people I looked up to in the internet sort of were just con men, and I've realized now that I've sort of got to carve my own path. And one of the things that's sort of been ruminating in my mind lately is that when it comes back to the external validation, and actually, I'm going to check that out real quick. I'm going to figure out what the fuck that is. And, oh, okay, I got my boat. Good. Let's see what the fuck that is. That's a new block. Oh yeah, that is. Will this hurt me? No, it won't. I thought it was gonna be like magma from, mag. I forget what it's called, but like the magma blocks from normal Minecraft. Oh, it's orange coral. All right. So, anyways, I've sort of realized that, on back to the sort of external validation, one of the things I think has led me to seek external validation throughout most of my life is that technically I'm autistic. I've had an autism diagnosis since the age of 2. And I've been, sort of during my early childhood, I went through a lot of like therapies that sort of allowed me to get to the point to where I'm at today because, my parents say like when I was growing up, like I was pretty much nonverbal, but yeah, here I am, forming coherent words and sentences over a YouTube video. So I'd say that's a pretty good amount of progress, right? But one of the things that they'd always tell me is that like I was so determined and set on being normal. I'm not being seen as autistic and being seen as a normal individual. And I feel like, sort of in a sense, not to their fault, right? I think they're just trying their best. And even with all the people that helped me, I don't think they were necessarily malicious or anything. But I think what sort of ended up happening is that I basically ended up centering. Ah, shit, the fucking boat. Let me grab it real quick. There we go. All right. So, anyways, what I sort of ended up realizing is that like, during that period of my life, I was very focused on trying to become normal. I was so focused on gaining the approval of others and trying to get people not to think I was autistic. And, I've had my successes, I've had my falls somewhat, especially when it comes to social stuff. But when it comes to, I guess you could say generally not to social stuff, but for example, like me getting my driver's license, which is sort of a large struggle for me, me performing well academically, which used to be a big problem when I was younger, again, because of the autism, and I sort of made all these strides and milestones. I got to the point to where I'm at today, and that's what basically drove me, is to be normal. And I guess you could say that's sort of on my fault, and I should have known better, but I guess my argument to that would be is that I was just a kid. How could you necessarily expect me to know better? And I guess in a way, like, it's sort of just, you could argue that it was just sort of natural how things came. But sometimes, I've been sort of, don't fucking kill me, you bitch. No, don't kill me, you bitch. Alright. Now, I died there. Alright, well, let's go back to sleep, and then we can go ahead and go grab my shit. I didn't die that far, but anyways, so, as I was saying before, like, just one of the things that's sort of been lingering in my mind is, like, whether, like, sort of going through that therapy, and particularly for the longest time, I had an ABA therapist who's actually been a pretty good friend of the family. And one of the things I've sort of been asking myself is lately is sort of like, as a result of those therapies, I wonder if that sort of made me become so extrinsically motivated to the point where I have basically little to no intrinsic motivation. I mean, maybe it didn't make me that way, but maybe it supported it. I mean, I don't know. And another thing that just came about sort of a couple days ago as I've been thinking about this is that when I look at a lot of my social interactions, I sort of notice a pattern of behavior where I'll sort of try to go ahead and mimic what I think other people want from me. And a big thing that I've noticed I think is worth mentioning is that I'll have a bit of a tendency whenever like I go into a social situation beforehand, is that I'll go ahead and sit there and start thinking, like playing out the situation in my head and thinking of like all the things I should say, the way I should say them, how I should act, how I should respond. And it kind of makes it to where like social interactions are almost like, if I had to describe it, almost like a delicate dance where I'm constantly trying to think of like what to say next or what to do, and I'm constantly pondering over like how I should mimic this, specific like body language or something. And I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it can sort of get very exhausting. And one of the things that I sort of got hurt, I got reminded of is one time I was out with my parents and we were meeting like an old family friend, and they went ahead and mentioned that like when I was younger, how they sort of got me to the point to where where I'm at socially, maybe deficits and all, but still fairly good comparing to where I was at before. They said like one of the ways that they helped me do that is that they would play out hypothetical situations. And where did my shit go? This might be a problem. I might have just lost all my shit. Anyways, and they said, they'd give me hypothetical scenarios from which to work from, and they go ahead and analyze it and figure it out. And when I heard that at the time, I was like, oh, that's why I do that. And it sort of, again, just sort of goes back to the point where I sort of feel like, in a way, that sort of the therapy that I went through and it's not you can't really necessarily really blame anyone because like again, like it's hard to blame people for these things, and honestly, I think at the time, everyone involved was sort of just trying their best. But I sort of feel like in a way that sort of that AB, going through those therapies and whatnot, and being so, I guess, extrinsically motivated. Or I guess yeah, the therapies help sort of enhance my how extrinsically motivated I was, and I've sort of just come to the realization that now it's like, it just kind of sucks because now here I am at like 21 basically having to deal with this shit. And it kind of feels like I should have been dealing with that, when I was younger, when I was like in my teenage years, but I realize that at the same time, it's better that I know now than never, and there's a lot of people out there who just never really end up questioning this aspect of their life, who never really want to go out, and really change anything, and I guess I'm trying to make an effort to better myself, which I guess is good in that regard, but I just wish in some way things were different. But, I mean, sort of other than that, I mean, I've been sort of just slowly trying to build myself, back up, trying to build myself up mentally and also physically, which sort of leads me to my next point, which is that during my basically the first week of classes at my new college that I went to, which is a university, which before I was just going to a community college, I ended up getting COVID, and as a result of that, I basically ended up being completely and utterly deconditioned until basically recently. Because not only did I get COVID, but once I recovered from that soon after, I got a really bad sinus infection. And it got to the point where I was so badly, like, deconditioned to where, like, even walking, like, a quarter of a mile to a half a mile to walk to one of my classes, because I park pretty far away from, like, my campus. And, I was so badly deconditioned that just by walking there were some classmates there that needed to ask me something. They were trying to converse with me, and I could barely converse because I was having trouble breathing. And it sounded like I ran, even though I just fucking walked like quarter of a mile to half a mile, which is just next to nothing. Which sort of just boggles, again, sort of just boggles my mind that things got so bad. And it's really only been till like honestly this last week that I've been able to even go back and enter into the gym, and even then I'm having to do most of the stuff light. Like for example, yesterday I tried going ahead and doing like a proper leg day where I went ahead and did some I did some leg presses, leg extensions. I did some hamstring curls, some good mornings. And like afterwards, like I almost had to sit down because I sort of felt so lightheaded and I had like a horrid fucking migraine. But luckily, it ended up fading back. So I'm hoping that I can go to the gym tomorrow and do like one more exercise to full intensity. And I'm hoping that like within like the next couple weeks I can finally get back to normal and sort of just get back to going to the gym. And I'm going to be entirely honest with you, during that time when I wasn't able to go to the gym, it kind of fucking killed me because I like going to the gym. I actually enjoy it. As I said before, the gym's one of the few things that like I actually get like I sort of get like some sort of like, intrinsic validation from. And, you could argue that maybe that's not the best thing to put all of your intrinsic, validation and motivation into one thing, and you'd be right, and I'm trying to focus on changing that. But like the gym's become a pretty big passion for me. And what's funny about it is I originally started out going to the gym just to basically get the attention of not only women, but also to have like sort of a masculine hobby so that I could relate to other dudes. And of course, what I ended up figuring out is that it's actually quite the opposite. It's actually quite the opposite when it comes to dudes in many regards, because at least most of the guys I talk to don't really seem that interested into it as much as I am. And I'm starting to figure out that like I didn't really need the gym to do that. I just, sort of needed to work on myself, and I'm, sort of continuing to do that. But yeah, so that's sort of what's been going on with me is just a lot of like just a sort of lot of work, a lot of I guess self-work, and just sort of trying to get back into the groove of things. And I really hope that that everything sort of pans out really well. I hope that as I continue along this journey, things will get better. Because I'm not gonna lie, there's been plenty of times where I've sort of gotten demotivated or discouraged, but honestly, at this point, I'm starting to feel like I'm probably in the best shape, both physically and mentally, I've probably ever been in my life. Because not only, am I seeking a therapist now, and not, seeking a therapist now, but I also have the proper mindset to actually make therapy work. And I'm doing all this progress sort of on my own to help better myself. And I'm kind of proud of myself for it because in a way, I'm finally getting to the point to where I've always wanted to be. Because I used to say this, I said it, when starting this video, is that like I've always sort of felt like that, like, there's always been something holding me back, and that like there's this ideal version of myself that I've always wanted to be, but I've never really knew the way to attain it or get it. And like for the longest time, it was just something that I just accepted and didn't know what to do. And then the way that I sort of tried to go ahead and become that man I wanted to be is sort of again falling in the steps of like the Andrew Tates, the Hamzas, all these fucking red pill fitness YouTubers, thinking that like they'd somehow save me, and I'd constantly say to myself all the time, I will be the barbell will save me, but I've sort of come to realize that that's not really the way to do it, and I realize that the only way I can become the man I want to be, which is to sort of do, work on myself, do therapy, come to terms with sort of what's happened to me in the past, and try to learn from my past mistakes and hopefully not only learn from them, but also I hope one day I can help teach other people. This is part of the reason why I even bothered to make this video, is that, I sort of want to be a voice for people out there so that people don't end up making the same mistakes I did, so I can be a testament to show that like, hey, just investing all of yourself into the gym, making it your whole personality without doing any kind of social work, without going through all the necessary stuff that you need to, isn't going to help you in the long term. It's only going to make you miserable, and it's not going to fix the problem. And in my case, I ended up sort of taking the gym to the scream to a point where I ended up like dieting down like 20 fucking pounds in like 3 months. And I really do regret that. I wish I would have done things differently, especially for someone of my weight who, I've sort of always been, in my, throughout, every point in my life besides like till now, I've sort of always been kind of like on the verge of being overweight, being like at overweight, or being like at a high BMI or at very close to it. And I didn't really have that much muscle, so I guess you would categorize me as skinny fat. Because although, yes, I was overweight, however, I was fairly skinny and I didn't really have that much muscle. So if I were to go back and do that again, and I'd honest to God probably recommend this for anyone, because I'd argue this is just the most mentally healthy way to do it, especially when you're starting out in the gym, is just basically just try to eat a clean diet, eat around your caloric maintenance, and just focus on you know learning to love the gym. Focus on trying to learn the movements and whatnot, getting yourself immersed in sort of the community. Because I'd argue the gym, one of the reasons why I love the gym personally is I feel like every time you go into a gym, at least from my experience, you experience a group of supportive people who are willing to help you along the way. Now, of course, I know you're not supposed to make generalized judgments, and that's, fair enough, but at least from my experience, at least, I find it to be a really supportive community. And just sort of just, make yourself a part of that community, look at the good aspects of it. And I think that if people like me would do that, if they'd probably be in a far better place. And honestly, I wish I would have done that. So I hope that sort of in some way that like this reaches someone who's sort of going down the similar path that I did. And I hope you listen to this advice. I hope you take it to heart, and like I hope you learn from my mistakes and you don't end up doing the same shit that I did. And again, I'm gonna be honest, I don't have all the answers. I'm still figuring a lot of this stuff out myself, but I hope in some way that just by posting this, I can sort of be an inspiration to other people that like, even though things might not be that great, at the end of the day, you know, we still have to go ahead and work on ourselves, and we're still the only ones that are really capable of change. And that's sort of the realization that I've come to, is that I guess another one is that like throughout most of my life, I've sort of always looked at my actions and the way that I sort of responded to situations for almost a third person point of view, without ever realizing that like the only person that was really responsible for like the actions in my life was me. It was nobody else, and I'd always sort of looked to blame other factors or other circumstances and never really wanted to take blame or anything or look at myself too critically, which I guess you could say is just how 99% of the human population is in a lot of ways. I guess you wouldn't say is entirely wrong, but I think that, at the end of the day that, I forget where I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, like, at the end of the day, I've sort of realized that, like, in order for me to make any change in my life that I've always wanted, it's going to have to come down to me. It's not going to come through easy solutions, and it's going to be hard, and I have to undo a lot of thinking, a lot of thinking that I've sort of stuck to before that I thought worked, but actually never did. And I sort of just hope that over time, as I continue to go through this journey, that I'll become the man that I want to be, and I believe I will, because again, like I said before, I think I'm at sort of the best point in my life to do so, since I'm sort of the mindset that where I can enact the kind of change that I've always wanted in my life. And I know I've sort of always had like sort of a focus on dating, but I've also realized that at the end of the day that, like, I really need to chill the fuck out in that regard, because I've sort of had a bit of a tendency to overanalyze and get over fixated on that. And that's for a whole slew of reasons, which I might go into a video on for why I think partially that's the case. But it could also just honestly come down to where, like, I guess you could say, at least from my experience, is that a lot of men, the only way you can really get, like, a lot of men just end up seeking out, like, external validation from women. I guess you could say I was just one of the many fucking dipshits who did that, and who thought for the longest time that somehow that would magically work out, and that if I had a woman by my side, it'd pretty much make me feel like 10 times better and be the spark that would bring about the change in my life. But I've sort of just realized that it's not really the way it works. If it were that easy, I think, self-improvement, wouldn't really be that hard of a thing, and everybody would be the best version of themselves if that was really the case. And I've sort of just realized that, especially over the past, like, couple months at least. But I think what I'm probably, sorry, this got sidetracked, but what I'll probably end up doing is I'm gonna try getting some iron to sort of build myself back up to where I was before, to get me back my iron armor and that, some tools, and then I'll probably just go ahead and probably head off from there. Go ahead and craft a pickaxe real quick, because we're probably going to need a lot of these, a lot. There we go. Go ahead and get that going. There we go. And then I guess another thing that I would like to mention is that I realize I'm going down the same fucking path. But anyways, one of the other things I'd like to mention is that sort of like something that was almost like a foreshadowing for what was to come, everything I was going to learn, is that, excuse me, is that there was this guy at my gym, right? Not the gym that I go to, which is sort of at my college. This was like at my local YMCA. But there was this guy there, right, who looked about my age, but he was like jacked, and you could tell that, like, he's probably lifted for years and probably knows a good amount more about lifting than I do, especially at that time. Right, and and I remember talking with him one time because I asked him, like, if I should get a lifting belt or not, because he had one. I was almost just trying to start conversation, because again, especially during that time in my life, I sort of went through spouts where I try to go up and talk to random people just to help my social skills somewhat. And surprisingly, he ended up recognizing me and remembering me. And he, one day, I was lifting, we were like sitting there talking, because he actually ended up remembering me. And I told him, like, sort of what my goals were, which is that, I wanted to hit it. I wanted to hit a 315 squat. And then he told me, like, man, that's all you want to hit? I mean, for me, I felt I hit that pretty easy. But then again, you're also shorter, and I guess it's different. Everyone has different goals in that. Just got to put things into perspective. And then I ended up saying, like, I really want to hit a 225 bench. And one of the things I remember him telling me is that, like, because I was sitting there and talking about, like, all these goals and shit that I wanted to hit, and he's like, you think it'll be 225, but then it'll be 250, but then it will be 315, then it will be 320, then it will be 350. It'll never end. And I'm like, yeah, but, like, and I guess what I should say is, at the time, I sort of just ended up sort of passively agreeing with him, because what are you going to do? But sort of what I was sort of thinking in my head, or at least at that point in time, was that, like, like, oh, it won't. I'm thinking, like, oh, well, I need to hit a 225 bench, because that's what, that's what men are supposed to do. Men, the average male is supposed to hit a 225 bench. If I don't, then I just look like a joke, right? And what I sort of didn't end up realizing, and the point I think he was trying to get at, and I've sort of, realized in retrospect, is that, like, when it comes to, like, lifting, or I guess when it came to lifting, like, I was so focused on, like, meeting these strength standards and goals, because I wanted to sort of, you know, prove to others that I'm like worthy of being seen as a man, and prove myself worthy, when like I didn't need to do that. And that what I should have been doing instead, and I've sort of taken this stance now, is just sort of appreciating the process of lifting up. Son of a bitch. Got my boat on me. I'm gonna have to go back. I guess I could go back to another mountain. I sort of realized that, like, I shouldn't really be so focused on the destination when it comes to lifting, honestly, life in general, but just like on the journey and enjoying the process. And now that I've done that, I'm not going to lie, I would argue I probably made more progress back then than I did. What I'm trying to say is I probably made more progress now than I did back then, and I'd say that's partly attributed to that change in mindset and not being so focused on hitting the strength goals, because that'll come naturally. If you're really dedicated to the gym and you push yourself really hard, you take your sets to failure and whatnot, and legitimately enjoy the process and don't give a shit what other people think or what standard you should be hitting, but just trying to focus on enjoying the process, well, then I feel like at the end of the day, you'll end up hitting that point just naturally. And I realize that in a lot of ways that if I, you know, wasn't so focused on hitting these specific strengths goals and didn't attach so much of, I guess, my self-worth to them, I probably would be in a far better place. And I guess I just wanted to mention that because it kind of just shows, like, sort of at the time, sort of how delusional I was and how, that guy ended up being right. And I kind of wish, back then I would have listened and actually understood what he was saying. But I guess at the end of the day, sort of everyone ends up saying that about, like, events in retrospect, because people will say like, oh, when I was younger, I should have valued this more or that more. And it's like, well, I guess you ultimately can't know until that time comes. But I guess in this specific case, like, I feel like sort of the writing was on the wall. Everyone was telling me that sort of, hedging all of my bets in the gym was gonna backfire horribly, and I wasn't gonna be any happier for it. And I even had one friend told me that I'd probably end up with body dysmorphia. And the funny thing is, he actually ended up being fucking right. And when I went to therapy and I sort of told my therapist, about some of the stuff, how I sort of felt about my body and whatnot, and how I felt like in a lot of ways that I was like a weak, skinny bitch, and how like I feel like the only way that like I guess in essence, like the only way that I'd feel validated is if I hit this like, certain body type and this strength standard, and how like, particularly when I was dieting down, I'd look at myself and say I was fat at the time, but if I'm gonna, fuck you, bitch, don't fucking kill me. Fuck you, bitch. Alright, anyways. But, yeah, and sort of realized that, like, I look back at those photos now, and I was like, oh my god, I look fucking emaciated. And again, I still had a bit of a belly, but that's because I didn't. Are you fucking kidding me? Fucking hate creepers. Anyways, because what I sort of realized is that, like, sort of at that time, like, of course I had a little bit of belly fat, because again, I didn't really work out much, and I ended up losing a lot of weight fairly quickly, and I didn't really combine that with doing any kind of proper resistance training. I just kind of did, like, a bunch of, like, body weight workouts. And so I looked incredibly emaciated, but because I still had this, like, little belly, like this little kangaroo pouch that wasn't even that big, and because I remember watching a YouTube video by like Greg Doucette where he said like if you don't have abs you're fat, so I'd fucking tell myself that I was still fat and I needed to diet down further, even though I look emaciated and was fucking horrible. I was tired all the time and fucking hungry, hungry all the fucking time because I was eating below sort of my caloric maintenance. And and that sort of just kind of made me realize that, like, my friend was right about all that, and I was going to end up in this place. And honest to God, I'm glad that I, have him as a friend, because he sort of made me realize that, like, the way that I've been living my life up to this point, he was sort of the catalyst for that, was that, like, it doesn't work because shit's not really going to change unless I go ahead and change myself from within. And I sort of always, in a sense, always had that, like, this sort of inkling that, like, this was the case. And the reason I say that is because I sort of look at, like, whenever I'd make major accomplishments in my life, major accomplishments in my life, and I even said this, like, on the way to my driver's license, and the thing I would tell myself secretly is that, like, you're going to go ahead and get this driver's license. You think it's going to change your life, but it won't. You're still going to end up in the same fucking place. But a sort of a louder voice would sort of just end up saying that, like, hey, if you get this driver's license, your life is going to change. You're finally going to get all the, get this attention from women. You're going to finally get the social success that you want. You're finally not going to feel like a fucking alien, you won't feel like an imposter. You'll finally feel like the man you want to be. And what I sort of ended up figuring out is well, that's not the case, and I was fucking right all along, that sort of inner voice in me. And that sort of just got cultivated over time just through realizing, through making all these strides and accomplishments and advancements, again, like in relation to my autism, because I've made major strides, and there's a lot of autistic people, and I'll say this, I'm very grateful in the fact that I've made the strides that I have, but, again, sometimes I wonder, like, sort of like at what price. And I guess now what I'm going to choose to do is that instead of sort of just wallowing about it like I would have done in the past and just say like, oh, I'll never have a chance, I'll forever be screwed. I'm going to use this as sort of an opportunity to sort of look at ways I can sort of, you know, be my authentic self and even find it to a certain extent and focus on trying to, just be my authentic self, caring less about relationships and shit, and just focus on trying to live life. And I think by doing that, I'll be a lot happier of a person. I feel like I'll be much more comfortable, and I hope that I can get to the point one day to where I don't end up going into this like social situations where I'm sort of kind of like stressed out and constantly thinking about what I should say or what I shouldn't say. And I guess it's sort of part of being autistic, and maybe I can't uproot that entirely. But I want to think that I kind of can in a way. If I learn to sort of just chill the fuck out, not care so much about what other people think, and not so focused on seeking the external validation of others, that through that I'll sort of just be able to be my authentic self, and whoever doesn't really like my authentic self, well, they can just go fuck off. But the people who do, and those are the people that actually matter, is the people who want you for you, not the people who fucking just stick around because they like, sort of the charade that you put on for them. And I hope that by doing that, that I'll finally sort of get the sort of, again, the sort of the internal validation that I've always wanted but didn't really fully realize, and hope that I can finally achieve some semblance of peace in my life. And I sort of feel like, I'm sort of getting to the point now where I might actually be able to do that. Now, I'm probably just going to go ahead and end the video here because honestly, I think I've covered everything that I've sort of wanted to talk about, and honest to God, I don't want to go out and go run in the mines because I've already fucking died twice from like creepers and shit. So I'm probably just going to go ahead and end it off here and go to the ceremonial fucking dirt pool. So, as you can see, my skin's gone. I don't know what's up with that. But anyways, I'll go and end the video off here. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, do the usual. You know what I mean. Anyways, bye!